we have day 28 of the Karen Read trial, and this is it, folks. This is the day that we have all been waiting for. This is what we were waiting for since we had the tech experts and Reconstructionists Burgess and Welcher. We have been waiting for ARCCA. If you don't know who ARCCA is in the Karen Read retrial, these were folks who are Reconstructionist biomedical engineer experts who work for the company ARCCA, and they were originally hired in the first trial by the feds to do their own independent investigation, and then the defense brought them in to help them with their case. And there was a whole voir dire that happened. I will link below if you want more information on the ARCCA voir dires about how desperately hard Brennan tried to keep ARCCA out of the second trial. He had been trying since day one to dismiss, to not allow, to just keep them out. Whatever ARCCA had to say worries Brennan. And today we found out why. Now, big difference between ARCCA's testimony from the original trial to the retrial, because in the original trial they were just there to explain experiments that they did and what some of their findings were. But we have to keep in mind that they were doing stuff for a federal investigation, which involved the grand jury, which means a lot of it was under seal. So there's a huge amount of things that they're not allowed to say, that they're not allowed to go into, because it's a sealed government thing and they signed non-disclosure agreements and all that. There was a ton of discovery violation things brought up involving ARCCA. Well, despite his best efforts, ARCCA has been allowed to testify. They're allowed to talk about what they said in the first trial with their original reports, and they're allowed to be, as they're acting now, as rebuttal witnesses. They did a slew of new tests and new sets of tests that they had done previously to rebut Dr. Welcher's experimentations and Reconstruction viewpoints. And what they had said was that there was a cannon. Hey, we get to see the cannon. We didn't just get to see the cannon. And you're like, cannon? Why was there a cannon? It is a specially designed mini cannon that ARCCA had developed to be able to replicate someone throwing a glass at a shot glass, or not a shot glass, a glass at a taillight. They had several SUVs. I cannot imagine the cost of having to have multiple SUVs to be able to throw glass at the taillight of. Lexus SUVs are not cheap vehicles, but they had the same make, model, and year of Karen Read's SUV, albeit this particular model was a different color, but they said that really helps be more distinguishing for them, whatever. But they were able to replicate it. But they said that even though they tried over and over and over, even though it seemed similar, it never got to the extreme damage that happened. And we'll show the pictures of how Karen Read's thing was. They said the taillight damage, while it was different, and it did break the taillight to an extent, it was never as severe of damage as the Karen Read's was. Something else happened to Karen Read's vehicle other than the glass being smashed at it, because it just didn't do that level of damage. And then it was further explained to us by Dr. Wolfe, W-O-L-F-E, who is our ARCCA expert on the stand right now. He was saying that the taillight has multiple layers to it. Now, we have not heard this from any of the other experts from the Commonwealth or either of the experts. I mean, they weren't in charge of it for the defense. This expert is that the taillight has 5 millimeters of the red polyester plastic, and then there's a little gap, and then there's another layer of clear plastic. There's 2 layers of clear plastic, and then there's a metal lining on the inside that's around the actual light bulb holding fixture. Because there were pieces of debris and nobody explained where they came from. Everybody was having questions who's interested in this trial. They're like, this is a lot of pieces. Well, then we also had Dr. Wolfe explaining how he did multiple tests, and he showed multiple videos of different angles, speeds, frequencies of, and countering the tests that Dr. Welcher had done about John O'Keefe's injuries. I'll have some screenshots. And they did it over and over and over. He did a few tests, Dr. Welcher did. Dr. Wolfe did tons of testing at various angles and things. Now, Brennan did point out to everyone that the weight of John O'Keefe's arm was 2 pounds off of the repeated dummy arm that they had used. Now, I don't know how much that matters, but what does matter and might matter to the jury is that for ARCCA's experts, they did have to have ways to keep the arm stabilized and held up to do the testing. So it's like they were held up to stability harnesses, and your arm, if it gets hit, it's not getting held up by a stability harness in any way. And Dr. Wolfe didn't pull away from that. He was like, yeah, because you can't just throw it in the air and hope that it hits. You just can't do that. You have to have it stationary so you can do the testing over and over and over. Then they had testing of a crash test dummy getting hit in multiple different ways. According to the data from Dr. Welcher, at 24 miles an hour, 80-something feet going backwards, getting sideswiped. And they were showing this dummy getting hit, how far he went. And what was useful for the prosecution was a lot of us, I'd seen comments in other channels and myself and people in the chat and Emily D. Baker's thing, we're all questioning, really, why was there so much debris found everywhere? If John O'Keefe was sideswiped backwards and got hit into a lawn, why were there not more pieces of this taillight that supposedly that was how it got shattered on the lawn? Why were they literally all over the place, found for weeks after the incident happened? And also, because they did not close off the road for a very long time. And in fact, after the original incident, because this was not treated like a homicide initially, they did not block off the sections or tell people they couldn't cross over here or anything like that. And there weren't any pieces of taillight there were only a couple pieces of taillight in the initial blowing down of the snow with a leaf blower. And so it's questioning, but when we saw the replications from Dr. Wolfe's videos over and over, debris goes everywhere. The span it's very much like it's a full-on explosion of just splattered pieces all over the place, everywhere, just every direction. Because when the taillight is broken and it has impact, it just whoosh, just bleh. And it's like, oh, so that's just what happens. That's why there are pieces everywhere. That makes more sense. Okay. And I think that matters. If we're trying to say that something happened at the Sally Port and then pieces were sprinkled everywhere afterwards, the defense going in that direction, hinting at it. They haven't directly stated that. They're hinting it. They're peppering it. Well, now we see that if somebody gets hit and there's a broken tail light, pieces are going to go all over the place. It's insanity. Oh. So that is very, very possible. But the problem was Brennan ended up once again shooting himself in the foot because he does something that you do not want to do to a jury. You do not want to do to your audience. People do not like to feel deceived. They do not like to feel like you are hiding something from them. And even if it's unintentional, even if you're just trying to like narrow something down, if you don't say that, it's going to look sus even if it's not. And when you're dealing with trial stuff, you have to tread carefully. If you don't know for sure that the jury is on your side, both sides here need to tread carefully with keeping a transparency level as much as they are legally allowed to. Because what Brennan did was he showed a very small picture of an arm, and he goes, you see, when somebody goes sprawling, they get holes in their hoodie. That's why there were holes in the hoodie. It wasn't because of a dog bite wound. It was because he got hit by a car. Oh, that's cool. What the defense just followed up with Dr. Wolfe was, he showed you this picture of the arm of the dummy after it had gotten full on hit and was in the road. And that's very important to note. And the thing that Brennan was showing to Dr. Wolfe to try to counter him, that was after a full-on collision, which the Commonwealth has been trying to say is not what happened because they're trying to explain the lack of bruising to the torso and leg area that is more consistent with being hit by a car, because they have had a lot of other medical experts who were like, yeah, his body's just not consistent with being hit by a car. There's not enough body injury anywhere else. He has some contusions and cuts on his head and lacerations and, you know, the raccoon eye effect on the eyes. And he has the lacerations on his arm. But that's not consistent with being hit by a car. You usually have broken ribs, broken bones, bruising, broken legs, torn ligaments. And none of that happened. And so the Commonwealth has been very much pushing for, well, that's if you're hit head on by a car. We're trying to say that when she backed up towards him, that she sideswiped him with the back end of her car. It was enough to send him flying. He fell on the ground, hit his head on the frozen ground, and that's why he's injured the way he is. He got cut on the taillight from the broken glass being thrown at the taillight. It was broken. That's how he got the lacerations. Okay, cool. Cool. But the thing that you're trying to point out with Dr. Wolfe about how holes, the way the holes were in the shirt, was because of him getting rug burn from the pavement and the asphalt. And guess what? When defense asked about it, he goes, what did the rest of the hoodie look like? What did the rest of the clothes look like? And Dr. Wolfe said the words mangled. They were completely mangled. Everything had road burn on it. They were all torn up and wholly. Everything, all of the clothes were messed up. So one, that's going to look shady. Why did you only point out the arm and not even try to explain the rest of the shirt and clothing? And two, when it was brought up by the defense about the rest of the clothes, it turns out it's not going to just be the arm. But with John O'Keefe, only the sleeve of his hoodie where he had the lacerations had holes in it. The rest of his stuff was intact. And that's not what would happen according to the repeated testing of Dr. Wolfe. So what we have at the end of day 28, we have day 29 coming in on Monday. What we have at the end of the day on Friday is that Dr. Wolfe did repeated counter testing, peer review testing to Dr. Welcher stuff, found very different results. And he was like, there is no way that a glass being thrown at a taillight could have caused the damage according to our testing. There's just too many layers of the taillight, of this particular style of taillight, for this to have happened. It never matched the damage to Karen Read's taillight. In order for being hit to be consistent with the clothing and damage to John O'Keefe, he would have had to have been hit into the road, not onto a lawn, and they couldn't replicate that damage either. So, and yeah, we have more accident reconstruction coming up. We have the next ARCCA expert coming up on day 29, who is going to do more of the medical explanation side of things. Dr. Wolfe is the reconstructionist damage side of things. So there we go. So I hope that you enjoyed my quick little coverages, and I will see you in the next video. I do have vlogs coming up, and I'm going to try to sprinkle in some different content other than just the Karen Read retrial, and I will see you all there. Bye.